These are multi-generational, and maybe someday I'll get to do some more research on this. My assumption or assessment over the years has been, if a region has been within conflict for a year, that equates to a decade of redevelopment and counseling and restructure of society and things like that. So the longer a conflict goes on, you're kind of multiplying out the number of years of change and transformation that will have to take place. Because we take Ukraine, for instance, we're 3 years in now, a little bit longer, right? 3 years or 4 years?
Yeah, I actually didn't
February will
realize until you just brought it up that, you're right. It's because it was February, March 2022, and we are well
past that.
That's
so you look at that and you think of all of those, the population, and especially the kids that have existed in that. Number one, how those 3 going on 4 years has retrained their minds on how to survive day in and day out. And we work with partners there, and they describe these kids have learned how to go to school and then sleep at night with the drones going over and missile attacks and living in bomb shelters and things like that. That's not a healthy way to develop, right? So what does that look like for the next 10, 12, 15 years of their life? Even if the war were to end today, how do you reshape their understanding of how to survive and live and thrive in a world where that's all they've known for the last 4 years? Not to mention the massive toll of loss of life, especially of fathers, grandfathers, uncles, those men especially in that society that have been lost on the front lines. Now you're going to try to rebuild a society once that peace deal is signed, we pray. But once that peace deal is signed, that's going to take generations.
These are fatherless families, right. And probably the first thing that I think of is, okay, well, there's boys being born.
Right.
These boys have no men to look to.
Right.
To learn how to become men, how to become fathers. I mean, the role of parents, the reverse would be true if there were girls being born with no mothers to look to, of how do I become a mother? How do I become a woman? How do I, it's true. But in this particular case, it's boys that, how do you rebuild a society? And I think about, Ukraine, they were a modern European country.
Yeah.
They had infrastructure that Africa, some of these, like you said, people that are being born in the bush, and this is really rugged stuff. This is like Heart of Darkness stuff. Ukraine was a modern European country. I would even look at, you said back in 2006, 2008, that what was going on with the Lord's Resistance Army was one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Well, let's put that in context. That's at the same time as the height of the insurgency in Iraq. And they still were out being considered. And again, I look at Iraq, though, relatively modern country, actually. Like a lot of people, I think it's in the Stone Age. It's not like Baghdad is a modern city. It's got skyscrapers,
right.
Things like that. And so I think, it's a different situation. But that 10-to-1 ratio that you brought up, 10 years for every 1 year in conflict, I want to kind of look back at our own history here. I'm not, there's a lot of people out there that really study the Civil War, and no, I'm not one of those people. But I bet, the Civil War lasted for roughly 4 years, 1861 to 1865, I think. I bet it took about 40 years before we started to reach some sort of sense of normalcy in the United States.
Right.
Roughly turn of the century, right? Like that's...
Because it's not just the loss of life and the destruction of the family unit and all those kinds of things. It's also all of the political implications and all of the societal changes that happen.
Actual damaged relationships between real people.
Yeah.
These aren't just headlines. Like there's real people that hate each other because of what happened between their two different social groups. Hate each other. If I see you in the street, I will fucking kill you. That, that's the attitude when it's that fresh. It kind of takes a generation to pass for that to,
And that's why I really believe one of the core aspects of what we're trying to do at ChildVoice is forgiveness is a key aspect of our trauma therapy and counseling that we implement. And forgiveness is a little bit of a foreign concept for us here in the West. Thankfully, in African cultures, it's much more accepted. Maybe it feels a little bit revolutionary when we see some of the things they're willing to forgive and move on from. obviously there's ways that they do that, but if we can help some of these girls, for instance, understand and forgive what's been done to them, not only from the rebels, for instance, but also from their own families who don't want to forgive them. If they can release themselves from the shackles of unforgiveness towards those different groups, now they become a beacon of hope, not only for others around them, but especially their children. And the hope is you don't stay stuck in this conflict, what you described, this conflict-driven, I hate these people for what they've done to me. But if they can be free of that forgiveness while at the same time developing skills and getting an education and things like that, they're starting to move forward in such a way that they're not going to recycle the same type of conflict in the future. And that's the hope, is as we really preach and talk about forgiveness in our programs, the goal is that we're crushing the presence of that unforgiveness that would allow people to stay stuck in the conflict for years and generations to come.
And I imagine it's not just forgiving with the people that did things to them. There's probably a lot of people that need to forgive themselves. The amount of moral injury that must be present.
Yeah.
I mean, I can barely wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from something as present day as there's a girl I met 2 years ago. She's a Congolese refugee. She was living in a refugee settlement in northern Uganda. At the time she was 16, she had 2 young children already. And her husband had been killed in front of her by rebels in the DRC. And she made her way to the refugee settlement in northern Uganda by herself, no family. It was just her and these 2 young kids. And so the guilt and the forgiveness she needed to give herself is a process, certainly, but she needed to not hold the unforgiveness against herself for allowing that to happen, or for what it meant for her kids. And, you know, as a parent, you carry the weight of the livelihood and the health of your children. And when you can't provide food for them or health care or opportunities, you carry the guilt of that too. Whether you deserved what happened to you or you were the cause of what got you into the place you're in, doesn't matter where you're at. As a parent, you carry that. And so she's had to go through this amazing journey of, what does that mean to forgive herself? Even though she's a victim, she's had to forgive herself for things that she's holding against her own self and the livelihood or the state of her family and what her children's future is. And thankfully, she's one example of many who have gone through that process, and it's a constant battle for her internally, but it's a battle she's winning, and she's beginning to see the future and the hope that she has for her kids. Still a lot of barriers to overcome, things that you and I will never face ourselves, and thankfully, because we'd probably get crushed by it. But it's people like that, like Kasimi, who I think give us hope for the work we do, and hopefully hope for other people to see that, you know, there's some beauty out of all this chaos, and there is some hope that infused with a little bit of inputs. Man, the resilience, I think, is the thing that I see especially in young people that are impacted by war and conflict. We live so safe here, for the most part, here in the U.S., and we can become insulated to our own comfort. And when my life gets to intersect with these young people who have seen and experienced traumas and chaos and horrors that I never wish on anybody else, I wonder if we could grab something from that, because I know it's a blessing for me to be able to have some kind of interaction with those types of people, and it influences what I do day in and day out.
Do you think, I've heard this concept of generational trauma before, like inherited trauma. You've been doing this long enough now where you've seen multiple generations.
Sure.
Do you think there's something to that? Do you think that some of these kids that are born into war, born into trauma are, even if they didn't experience it themselves, they still carry that on their shoulders?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, before I really got engaged with ChildVoice on this global scale, I was doing nonprofit work in an inner city context in upstate New York, and did a lot of work around generational poverty. And it's very real. The traumas of what your parents and grandparents endured, whether it was physical trauma or emotional trauma, economic trauma that impacted how they viewed life, that gets passed down. We as parents pass down how we view life to our kids, and they may alter and shift a little bit in their generation, but they are informed primarily by their parents, whether they're present or absent, and then whatever the parents or grandparents are carrying with them. I mean, so yeah, to answer your question, it's very real, and generational trauma is something you have to deal with. And so in our programs, for instance, at ChildVoice, we're serving the primary beneficiary, which is the girl or the young person who has been displaced or has been a victim of war in some way. But like I shared Kasimi's story, her 2 little kids have gone through our programs as well and gotten early education, and then food and health and all those kinds of things are wrapped up in it. And so they are beneficiaries as well of what we're trying to do. Although we're primarily investing in Kasimi, her 2 little ones are benefiting from that as well, to hopefully, again, coming back full circle, we want to change the trajectory of what their futures will look like, and that they aren't stuck in this cycle of violence and conflict and poverty, that they can start to move forward. And for someone like Kasimi, as we've seen time and time again over the last 20 years, as a mom, if her journey of healing and rebuilding for the future can influence a dramatic shift for the future trajectory for her children, then she may not, own 10 businesses and be a millionaire, but if she can change what her kids will experience in the future, as a parent, that's why we exist. Yeah,
that's all anybody wants to do anywhere in the world. They want any good person, I think, they want their kids to do better than them.
Yeah.
I think as kids, we owe it to our parents to try to move the ball forward,
sure.
move the ball a little bit further down the field,
yep.
right? Like,
yep.
Hey, thanks for everything that you did. I think most people would agree they learn sometimes a little bit of what to do, a little bit of what not to do from their parents, right?
Like, that is the truth. Yeah.
Hopefully you're wise enough to differentiate between the two, but then, you take that and hopefully it's a little bit better for you, and then your kids, it's a little bit better for them. And it's not this, I think it's rare. It happens, of course, but it's rare that there's just this 180 from one generation to the next. Usually it's a multi-generational thing. And that's when there's not trauma involved.
Correct.
I mean, trauma on the scale of war crimes and things like that.
So I guess one thing that I think about when I think about the generational impacts, I go back to, the 80s and 90s, especially the 80s when the HIV AIDS pandemic was sweeping across Africa in particular, but across the world. And, Bono was a huge voice in addressing those issues. And there was massive transformation that happened in that whole world. And I remember whether it was Bono or other leaders in that movement saying, speaking to my generation and going into the early 2000s when I had my kids, my life will be marked, my legacy will be marked by what I did or didn't do in regards to the HIV AIDS pandemic. I think in many respects, and obviously this may be a bit self-serving in terms of the work we do, but when you look at the number of conflicts and wars happening globally, more happening now than at any point since World War II, the amount of women and children that are impacted by these conflicts, I think we're in a space and time where our legacy will be impacted, will be defined by whether or not we played a role in some shape or form in helping people through the process of the collateral damage of these kinds of conflicts and wars. Because we don't see those numbers shrinking at all. And that means there's going to be more and more people globally that are impacted by it. And I don't want to sound dark and scary, but at some point it's going to come to the front steps of our country too.